Hello, good afternoon. My name is Jaap Schut. I'm with Pace Business Partners, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar version of the Bioplastics panel for the UNC Cleantech Summit 2020. I'm excited to host this session and have three great panelists for you today. Our Cleantech Summit is organized by the UNC Institute for the Environment and the Keenan Flagler Business School here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Today we have with us Michael Mang, Director of Materials Technology for Danimer Scientific, Paul Darby, VP of Marketing for Novamont North America, Nate Miranda, Director, Innovation Platforms and Sustainability for TC Transcontinental. And we have a great program for you. As a bit of a background, the UNC Cleantech Summit 2020 was held in February this year, physically in North Carolina. And we had a new track on the circular economy of plastics and have already executed at that date live four great panels, namely recycling, infrastructure and logistics around the circular economy of plastics, ocean plastics, recycling technology, and design for circularity. And due to a snow day back then, the bio-based plastics panel was shifted to today as a webinar. So we are glad that our panelists are on board. A bit of background before we start on the circular economy of plastics from my point of view is you can see here a diagram of this of the circular economy, pulling together various perspectives from the manufacturer, the consumer, and the solid waste handlers with the viewpoint energy and materials. So we focus today on the bio-based source of materials, so biomass-based materials, and the other four panels fit in this diagram like this. We talked about ocean plastics, design for circularity, recycling technology, recycling infrastructure, and today room for bio-based plastics. There are many interesting and great aspects here in this diagram for which we don't have time in this webinar, but maybe in future series. And there are great activities for companies large and small in the US and globally, as well as regulations in the circular economy. And today our focus, as I said, is on the bio-based plastics components contributing to the circular economy. To deconvolute and clarify a bit what this means, the audience might have heard of bioplastics or biopolymers, but that is a generic term and not everybody uses it in the same way. So in this table, you can look at it from two ways: the origin of a material, namely, is it oil-based, fossil-based? Are building blocks found in nature and then chemically transformed? Or are they fully nature-made materials made by some organism, a plant or a single-cell organism? And then you can consider the end of life of a material, of a polymer. It can be non-degradable, being persistent in nature for a decade, hundreds, or even thousands of years. It can be biodegradable and industrial compostable, which is slow degradation, or it can be fast degradation, backyard compostable, or if it's an implantable polymer, resorbable by the body on the short term. And then we have a number of examples here. It's a vast space with very interesting developments, and we have our speakers here today more in the, of course, the top line of this diagram on the cellulose, the starches, and the PHAs, polyhydroxyalkanoate polymers. And the classic plastics are in the lower left corner, your PET, PEs, PPs, which you can make bio-based versions of that are not degradable. And then there is another host of other materials, which goes a bit too far for this 1 hour webinar. But in the Q&A box that is there, you can answer your questions. And as we go along, our panelists are happy to answer any questions in that respect. So then let's kick it off. Michael, please introduce yourself and your company in a few minutes and a few slides.
Sure, thanks, Jaap. My name is Michael Mang. I'm Director of Materials Technology for Danimer Scientific in Bainbridge, Georgia. I've been with Danimer for about 5.5 years, and throughout my career, I've worked on biodegradable polymers, starting at Dow Chemical and through the founding of NatureWorks making PLA. So I have a long history with the development of biopolymers. I want to talk about a little bit, let's go to the next slide. Danimer is a fairly young company. We were founded in 2004, and our efforts are focused on the R&D and commercialization of biopolymers. We are, I'll say, agnostic about the source or a type of biopolymer that we work to commercialize, but really our emphasis is on finding performance-based solutions for customer needs, that meet customer needs at prices that they can afford to pay. We work on compostable materials, biodegradable materials, bio-based materials that may not necessarily be degradable or compostable in the traditional senses anyway. We believe that what we're doing with biopolymers is really key to getting the circular economy going, and by bringing in a range of technical application alternatives, allow people to approach the solutions in ways that make the most sense to them. Next slide, please. So this is a different approach to looking at what Jaap had, maybe a simpler view. You know, you have an axis of where the raw material comes from and an axis for degradability. Conventional materials go in the lower left corner, and bio-based, biodegradable materials go in the upper right corner. Now, the renewable raw materials give us things that, you know, generally or speaking, can end up in that upper right corner that sometimes is most desirable. But there are opportunities for practical application for polymers that are made from petrochemical raw materials that have the right or preferred end-of-life scenario. Now, the key point to remember through all of this is that and this is, as we talk about a circular economy, the value of these different benefits differs depending on who the end-use customer is. Some people care more about the fact that it's a renewable raw material. Some people care more that it's biodegradable. Some people care more about greenhouse gas reductions. With biopolymers as a broad space, we can address each of those benefits in a specific way. Let's go to the next slide, please. So just to be clear about the end-of-life scenarios, biodegradable is where the material is actually broken down by microorganisms, converted to CO2, water, and biomass. The material carbon is used as a food source, and occurs in, you know, pretty much natural environments: marine, soil, freshwater. Compostable is one where inputs are required. It has to be more of a controlled environment. And this can be in an industrial facility, or can be in a backyard composting pile. And then recyclable is what we traditionally think of when we think about, you know, recycling plastics. But those can also be bio-based, and most of the materials that we work with in biopolymers can also be recycled much the same way that traditional materials are recycled. Next slide, please. This just shows the differences in conditions, really, the difficulty, if you will, of different end-of-life scenarios, where anaerobic digestion is the fastest, occurs obviously without oxygen, also at the highest temperature, and it goes all the way down to the opposite end of the scale for seawater, where you have very low temperatures and very low concentrations of microorganisms that can do the work of biodegradation. Next slide, please. So Danimer, one of our primary products that we're producing is PHA, polyhydroxyalkanoate. It's a bio-based, biodegradable polyester that's made by fermentation of seed oils or plant oils. We use canola. The micrograph shows granules of PHA inside of cells. The key end-of-life attribute of this is that it rapidly degrades under both aerobic and anaerobic conditions, pretty much under any natural or designed environment. And yet you can get useful, practical, mechanical, physical properties out of the material. Mechanically, it looks a lot like a polyolefin, and yet it also brings in some polyester-like properties. So as a raw material for addressing the application needs of people, it really gives a tremendous amount of flexibility. Next slide, please. So that's really what how I wanted to introduce Danimer. Our vision for the future is that we'll be able to use plastics in the ways that make our life easier, but that do not have a substantial adverse effect on the environment.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michael. And then the next company, Paul, kindly introduce yourselves and your company, Novamont.
Sure, thanks, Jack. Yeah, so Novamont are a world-leading company in the sector of bioplastics and biochemicals. We were founded in 1989. Our headquarters are actually based in Novara in Italy, which is close to Milan. As for my role, I joined Novamont back in 2015 as the area manager for the UK and Ireland, and I transferred to our US division in 2018 in a marketing role. Next slide, please. So really, what is quite key for Novamont is I really feel the bioeconomy is something we've been trying to not just promote, but also practice since our conception. And we really work on three main pillars. The first one we say is reindustrialization. So we have 4 key manufacturing facilities. The investment's been over around $600 million since conception. And basically these are built on old petrochemical sites, old fermentation sites. So really we try and reinvest in either disused or no longer competitive manufacturing sites, invest in new equipment, use old equipment, and really try and create local jobs in the local community. Another key of the pillars is we say low impact value chains. We do use renewable materials. So again, we work very closely with agriculture to try, to ensure all our materials are sourced sustainable. And finally, and a key one, where probably more in my role, is really products really as unique, sustainable solutions. And really, we try and design products that can solve, current environmental concerns, particularly trying to help have an impact on soil and water quality. Now, one of the applications for our main products, we make the resin, we don't make finished products, so we make the biopolymers. A key application for us, as you can see in the photograph, is a compostable bag, like the one here. I mean, you could see it's quite a simple product. This is found in Trader Joe's, but we try and think much more of the application. Why should you use a compostable bag rather than just a product? Now, I also represented Novamont on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation New Plastics Economy on their advisory board for 3 years. And again, during meetings there, we even found people in the industry that didn't quite know, what is compostable? What does it mean? So we got together with some other key brand owners. We got together with PepsiCo, with Unilever, with some of the public sector. We got together with some contacts at the the city of Seattle, public utilities. And we tried to develop a video on what is compostable packaging. Now, the developer said, please keep the video no more than 90 seconds. Any more than 90 seconds, people will switch off. So we got our brains together. We said, okay, it's got to be 90 seconds. Unfortunately, we couldn't do 90 seconds, but we've got a video here. It lasts 2 minutes. I hope you'll stick with it. It is on YouTube. Please just Google search. If you look under videos, it should arrive on the first page. And yeah, please show the video.
Okay, here we go.
Many of the world's leading companies are working towards using 100% reusable, recyclable, or compostable packaging by 2025. What is compostable packaging? How is it composted? And why is compost good for the environment? Compost is a product which enriches soil as a plant fertilizer, captures carbon, plus helps retain water for plant growth and reduce flooding. Commercial composting is a natural process accelerated in specially designed and operated facilities where experts produce high-quality compost. Compostable packaging is typically manufactured using regional facilities, compostable packaging must undergo rigorous testing according to well-established international standards. The tests include disintegration, biodegradation, and no toxic impact to the final compost. Packaging which passes all the tests can then be certified by independent third parties and display a logo of proof. Littering is not composting, and being compostable does not mean you can throw it in the environment. Compostable and traditional plastics need to be disposed of separately from each other to match the local recycling facilities. Clearly labelled compostable plastic packaging can be a good solution, especially when used to help collect any food waste nutrients and dispose together in an appropriate food waste recycling bin. Working examples of compostable packaging systems in place include food service packaging in Seattle, shopping bags in Milan, fresh produce bags in Paris, and events such as the Super Bowl 52 Rush to Recycle initiative in 2018.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you, Paul. And that's it for you, I imagine. Great. Right, and next up, Nate. Hold on 1 second. Transcontinental. Nate, go ahead and introduce yourself and your company.
Sure. Thank you, Jaap. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nate Miranda. I am the Director of Innovation Platforms and Sustainability at TC Transcontinental. I'm a chemical engineer by training, and I have been in the packaging industry for 27 years now. I'd like to introduce TC Transcontinental, so Jaap, please move on to the next slide. So TC started out as a printing company. They've been printing newspapers and circulars for many decades. In the last few years, they've started to acquire flexible packaging company initially for their printing assets, but eventually the printing industry is an industry that's not growing, but flexible packaging is. So they have, and you'll see this in an upcoming slide, you'll see how the TC Transcontinental has transformed through the years. It has about 3 billion Canadian dollars in revenue, which is about 2 billion in US dollars, over 8,000 employees, and we have quite a number of facilities. Next slide, please. So this slide shows you how the TC Transcontinental has transformed from primarily a printing company to a packaging company. In 2014, the Carolina blue sliver there is very, very small, but as you see through 2017 and 2019, it is now over half of the company. So TC has acquired companies, packaging companies, and put them together, and we are now a leading supplier of flexible packaging in North America. Next slide, please. The core markets that we serve with that we sell our flexible packaging into, primarily cheese. So if you buy shredded cheese in the grocery store, more than likely it is in a package that was supplied by TC Transcontinental. Meat is another big area for us. Pet food packaging, as well as consumer packaging, are also big areas for us. Next slide, please. In 2019, we signed the Ellen MacArthur Foundation pledge. We are the first flexible packaging company to sign this pledge. And what the pledge is that by 2025, we commit that we will have 100% of our plastics packaging will be either recyclable, compostable, or reusable. The other part of the pledge is that 10% of that packaging that we sell must contain post-consumer recycled content. That's a tall order because, you know, people say, 10%, what's that? That doesn't sound much. But when you sell 350 million pounds of plastics packaging in 2019, and you're growing, 10% of 350 is 35 million pounds of plastic that we have to somehow successfully recycle back into our packaging. And that's actually my role at TC is to ensure that we meet our commitment by 2025, and I lead our R&D efforts to meet this pledge. Next slide, please. So here's some examples of some of our sustainable packaging. We offer 100% recyclable or recycle-ready polyethylene-based pouch and roll stock. So you can see how these are some examples of packaging there. Now the one on the right is for packaging of nuts. And if you just simply put those let's say those nuts and those dried fruit into 100% polyethylene package, it's not going to last. It's going to turn rancid, and it's not going to make the what do you call it, the shelf life that's desired by the brand owner and by the consumer. So we have to do other things to the film to give it the proper oxygen barrier, for example, that's required. And those are the type of developments that we do within R&D, and yet still have that package to be fully recyclable. So you can take this package after you use it, and you can drop them off at your grocery store in the same places that you would drop off your plastics-based grocery bags. Next slide, please. In this slide, I'm describing the compostable offerings that we have. You can see that there's some coffee packaging there. There's some overwrap for those coffee pods, as well as packages that can be sold in stadiums that will then be industrially composted. So here's some examples of packaging that we sell. These packaging usually contains things like paper, cellulosic materials, or what do you call it, industrially compostable polyesters. Next slide, please. And this is my final slide about TC Transcontinental, just to show you how committed we are to meeting this, this pledge for the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We have invested in creating a recycling group. So we will be the first flexible packaging supplier to be vertically integrated with a recycling group. So if a brand owner came to us and said, hey, we truly want to be circular, we want you to pick up packages that belong or that we've made or that we've used, and then recycle it back into packaging that you would sell to us, we would be equipped to do that because we have that recycling infrastructure internally to us. So that's it for now. Look forward to your question, or look forward to the panel, and look forward to your questions.
That's great. All right, thank you all. Very informative and interesting. Yeah, I'd like to kick it off. And of course, in your introduction, all three of you already went a bit for this topic, but maybe to paint the bigger picture, what are, and I'll start with Michael, what are trends and drivers in your industry that, that basically guide and determine what you are doing at your level as a company, and what are trends, drivers, needs at your customers level in relation to your activities in the circular economy and bioplastics, of course, bio-based plastics?
Sure. I think one of the biggest trends that I would say has emerged over the past 5 years is that people are taking the notion of a circular economy much more seriously. I think in the very early days of biopolymers, you had to, the thought, sort of conventional wisdom was that a biopolymer had to both meet all of the performance requirements as well as the cost of an incumbent material, or it wouldn't be replaced. Mm-hmm. And I think two things have happened in the meantime that are accelerating more recently. As people make commitments to improve their sustainability and their environmental impact, they're realizing that in some cases the performance requirements are not as well defined as they think they are. You know, think of something as mundane as a drinking straw, a plastic straw. We're very familiar with polyethylene or polypropylene straws. They perform a wonderful function, but you can make a straw, as an example, that does not necessarily match the properties of polypropylene, but is still perfectly functional as a plastic drinking straw. You know, you can buy them at Walmart today, and when you look at them, it looks just like a straw made out of PHA, but it has a different end of life and a different environmental impact. And then as far as the cost goes, people are much more comfortable taking a look at systems cost rather than just as a bulk cost of a pound or a kilogram of raw material. They're saying, okay, if I do this, you know, I have a life cycle cost, both in converting my entire supply chain and the end of life. And the biopolymer alternatives end up not being, you know, 5 times as expensive. They might be a little bit more expensive today, but that cost equation has changed as well, and people are looking more broadly at system cost.
Yeah, very good. Okay, interesting. Paul, for you, the same question on trends and drivers and how that steers what Novomont is doing for their customers.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'd say a key trend for us is really the increasing awareness that we should not be sending food scraps to landfill or incineration. And in the US, we send around 94% of all food scraps go to landfill or incineration. But it's improving. You know, some cities are looking at recycling food scraps. In Europe, by 2023, the European Union, all EU countries can no longer send food scraps or organics to landfill. So again, I would say we're trying to develop products that really serve as an application. So again, I mentioned the simple bag, but the idea is it's not just a simple bag. You know, lots of people can reuse that bag to put food scraps back in the bag and, you know, and in a hygienic and clean way, recycle food scraps. The same in food service ware as well. So food service ware applications, we're not looking just at replacing maybe a standard plastic product. It's maybe that in, say, a restaurant or an event, and that all the materials, including food scraps, can be put into one bin and maybe sent to a composting or anaerobic digestion facility. So I would say really, we're really driven by trying to, you know, help how can we increase organics recycling, particularly on food scraps.
Okay, great, thanks. And Nate, of course, you as a user of materials instead of a producer of packaging bioplastics. What is your take on this?
Yeah, so the trend that I've seen over the last few years is that brand owners are now much more interested in compostable packaging, in recycle-ready packaging. So that's a great trend. The catch to that trend is that they want all of those are environmentally friendly options to be the same cost and to run in the same manner on their packaging equipment. And that's a challenge for sure. I mean, it's every salesperson dream to come to a brand owner and say, hey, I can offer you the same package with, and it runs the same way on your packaging machine. And oh, by the way, it's the same cost, and it's a no-brainer. Every purchasing agent for every brand owner out there will switch over to environmentally friendly packaging if they can. But the design of that, because in reality, what it is right now is that typically a salesperson has to go in and say, hey, I've got environmentally friendly packaging. It doesn't necessarily run as well as the incumbent, and it costs more, maybe sometimes substantially more. And I think that's the challenge that we're trying to tackle on the converter side.
Right. If you go to on the material side, if you go to your value proposition, this is for the two material companies, your value proposition, how do you see, as you mentioned in the past, vision of sustainability and materials and the circular economy was different. How do you see your marketing, but also a customer perception on a green, bio-based material that's also biodegradable, recyclable, so good footprint, versus product performance? Are they, can they go hand in hand? Are they mutually exclusive? And how has that evolved over the years? Paul, can you comment on that?
Yeah, sure. Like I say, so we really do try and focus on the application we're developing, not just the product. I mean, we have also been helped by legislation. So, for example, in Italy, France, and Spain, all the produce bags, used produce bags for fruit and vegetable, they now have to be compostable. They have to be certified independently compostable. And again, the main driver for that was not just to replace a plastic bag, which typically was not recycled, or, you know, wasn't sort of put into the recycling residential system. It was also that, you know, really communicate on the bag, you know, please reuse this bag that your fruits and vegetables come in for recycling food scraps. And a lot of countries, I know in the UK was one, you know, a landfill, you know, the landfill taxation was high. So again, there's economic drivers as well for municipalities to really encourage people to recycle organic. So again, as a company, we do work very closely with their local municipalities as well.
So very indeed regulatory driven, which in turn is goes hand in hand with customer and consumer behavior. Yeah. Michael, do you have a answer to that?
Yeah, I would say that the performance is actually one of the key drivers in customer acceptance. You know, if you provide a product that converts into a package or a part that doesn't function, no one's going to use it. You know, a bag has to hold the contents. A straw has to not collapse when it's in contact with the liquid. It has to also provide a real environmental benefit. You know, as Paul alluded to, the independent certification of the degradation and the compostability and the end of life is important, because people have been misled by claims over the years. So, you know, it has to have a real environmental benefit. And then coming back to what Nate said before, people have to be able to afford to buy it. For some people, some applications and some customers, it has to be a parity. Again, as a system, for other customers, they're willing to take more of a you know, gradual approach. They might start with a premium brand that they can command a premium price and afford to pay more, and then as the volumes increase, they can take advantage of the economies of scale and go to more broadly acceptable or broadly accepted product use.
Yeah, interesting. Nate, I'll pass this on in a second to you. A comment from my side. We've worked with bio-based polymer companies where you saw a shift in their mindset, how to position materials from where they noticed in the beginning, okay, this is green, it's bio-based, it's not petrochemical, hooray. Our clients like that, but that got old, or the message wasn't as strongly received in all market segments. So then they switched to indeed performance-based marketing and product development, and finding the fit and developing grades most fit for certain applications, like 3D printing, like indeed serviceware, or more maybe even medical applications. And they as a company then put that to the forefront and put the green bio-based argument more as a side effect, as a side message.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can see.
Yeah, I see the same thing as well. So to answer your question directly, as far as what's the value proposition that TC brings into the circular economy, is really overcoming some of the issues that we see with bio-based plastics. I mentioned one in the all polyethylene before. Another one is in compostable packaging. Most of the starting materials that we use to design packaging don't have much moisture barrier. And you can kind of see that if a material is compostable, that it's not going to have a whole lot of moisture barrier associated with it. However, if you were to put your crackers or salty snacks or chips into that type of package, well, they're going to get stale very quickly. Yeah. So what about the value proposition that TC brings is, what else can we do from a converting point of view to add more moisture barrier, for example. And I think that's one of the values that we bring. The second one is around lowering the cost of these environmentally friendly packaging. I mentioned in my introduction that we were investing in a recycle division. So we're trying to integrate all of these things so that the processes are within our house, so that we don't have to pay a middle person to do a step, for example. And again, the dream is to be able to go to the brand owners and say, I've got packaging that works the same, costs the same. Oh, and by the way, it also has a very nice compostable or nice end of life story associated with it.
Yeah. Okay, great, thanks. All right, thank you. There are questions coming in on via the Q&A box, so I'd like to pull out a few for you to answer. There's a question from Scott Farling. Hello, Scott. This is for Nate. And he asked, what type of technology is utilized for recycling your packaging products? So the technology type for recycling.
So the technology used to recycle our packaging would be mechanical recycling. So these are, because they're polyolefin based, they're not like, I don't have a very cost-effective way to chemical recycle our packaging at this point. So we are using mechanical recycling to recycle back our all polyethylene-based packaging.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then another question, consumer recycling rates in the US are quite low. Yeah, I can concur to that. Even globally, if you really critically look at it, they're below where we need to be. And the rest of the question is, do the panelists have plans to help educate consumers how to compost or recycle these products? Michael, is that, can I start with you?
Sure. I mean, it's part of our market communication is always helping people understand the end-of-life scenarios. You know, we find oftentimes that for our customers who are converters and brand owners, that they still need an education on what the differences are with the different end-of-life scenarios, and they will then end up formulating an end-of-life message for their customers. This is probably one of the more interesting and dynamic communications problems in the industry is, how do we communicate? You know, if Nate converts a package out of a compostable material and it looks exactly like the polyethylene-based alternative, how does he brand that, or how does his end customer brand that so that they know what it is? Yeah. You know, if we make a material that goes into a plastic straw that you can't differentiate from polypropylene, how does an end user know that there's an environmental benefit to using that? If Paul makes a bag, you know, how can we tell that it's a compostable bag? You know, bags may be easier, you can print on them, you can put logos on them, but some of the things that we use, you know, Nate showed a picture of the coffee pods. Those are compostable, but it's difficult to tell just from looking at the actual part that it is compostable. So that challenge of communicating this benefit is one that I don't think has been adequately resolved. You know, brand owners are working on that. You know, they're working furiously to try to understand the best way to communicate. Yeah. But it'll be a multi-pronged effort from all parts of the industry to make it effective.
I can add to that answer to the attendee that asked the question. There's the APR, the American Plastics Recyclers Association. They work together closely with organizations and brand owners, also non-profit organizations, to make the system work better. And there is a thing that the audience might have seen, is the How to Recycle label found on some packages. That tells the customer how to take a piece of carton, cardboard and plastic apart and what goes where. I can imagine that compostability will be more visible in that logo as well. Okay, Paul, a question for you. It says here, you have excellent bag product at the moment. How long does the bag take to decompose, and what does it decompose into?
Sure. I mean, our bags, as Michael alluded to, they're all BPI, so they're independently certified to ASTM and EU standards.
Yeah.
But typically, the bags we make, because they're very thin. I mean, we did trials in Connecticut. They went within, say, disintegrated within about 4 to 5 weeks. They were the same as the food scraps. They went as quick as an apple core. And then for the actual sort of official test, you know, then it has to completely biodegrade within 6 months through the composting process. But again, our bags actually, and a lot of our materials are also home compostable. They will degrade at lower temperatures as well. So, you know, so some areas you can backyard compost. It's not something I'd say is something we promote. We much prefer industrial, you know, and sort of residential organics done by the municipality. So yeah, so I would say the same speed as food scraps. The bags are very quick because they're very thin as well.
Yeah, and does it become CO2 and water, or is
Sorry, yeah. So exactly. It becomes CO2, water, and biomass. So
yeah, exactly. There's some soil earth type material.
We're trying to generate compost, but it completely degrades. There's no microplastics or anything like that.
Okay, great. Another question for maybe Nate. Start with you on this one. Could you comment on the uptake of extended producer responsibility? So commitment by the producer to take back and recycle their packaging. How is this happening now? And if not, what help drives its uptake? Of course, we heard part of your answer with the recycling company, but maybe you can elaborate.
Yes, that is the challenge, is when a brand owner, so they will be the one that's responsible for the packaging they use. So let's say they collect that. The question then becomes, what are they going to do with it? Mm-hmm. And because it's not really in a state that's ready to be recycled. And what I mean by that is, let's say you collect food packaging and people don't clean it out properly. What do you do with all of that rotting food that's on that package? How do you clean that off? Let's say you collect lawn bags or fertilizer bags. How do you clean off all of that mess? The other thing is all the graphics on the package. You have to be able to eliminate that or de-ink that package, so that you can turn it back into something that doesn't look like it's a gray mess when you try to put it back into your converting processes. So those are the challenges in terms of what do you do with that. And so what TC is doing, as I mentioned, is we're setting up our own recycling so that we can work with the brand owners and say, yes, you have a partner that can take back your scraps that you're responsible for, and then turn it back into packaging that you can reuse. So that's our response to that, is to develop the technologies internally and then be able to partner with the brand owners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, great. Then I'd like to, we have a few more questions coming in. Some will answer offline. And I had to mention in the beginning, which I didn't, but the full webinar is recorded. Questions will also be recorded and will be answered if needed one-to-one. So you'll have access to the slides, the recording, and all questions will be answered if we don't make it to an answer within the hour. That's for all the attendees. A question for me is a bit on the economics of things. Certainly now with virgin plastics made from oil prices at $20 a barrel, or even negative prices here. How do these economic considerations play for your company that manufacture materials not based on fossil fuels, but on agricultural residues or byproducts or products? Michael, is that something you can comment on?
Sure. Yeah, I think that there's again, back in the early days of biopolymers, there was a strong sense of coupling the price of oil to the price of a bio-based raw material, whether it be plastic or chemical. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is still some of that to a limited extent, but I think that again, people are looking more holistically at the true environmental benefits and performance, you know, what we're seeing is that our customers are committed to the materials that they're using because it's, you know, they're converting or they're packaging a specific consumer item that has a real benefit to one of their ultimate end use customers. You know, we're not directly competing with crude oil in making the products. You know, we're doing it because there's a different value proposition for what we're providing, and it's not, oh, you know, we can beat we can beat polyethylene as long as oil is above $40. That's not the game that we're playing.
Yeah, very clear. And Nate, from your point of view, does a high, medium, or low oil price change the way how you approach bioplastics or trying to reach the Ellen MacArthur goals?
Yes, it does, because I think I mentioned several times now that it's the brand owners. Yes, they'll pay a little more, but they still really, you know, a lot of our customers, brand owners, buy millions of dollars of packaging. So even a little more is substantial for them. So for example, I'll give you an example that I had just yesterday. We had a bag that was that had post-consumer recycled polyethylene into it. It came in at a penny more per bag. Okay, so you would think a penny, not too much, but that's substantial for a procurement officer out there. So yeah, I think that it is a challenge, especially when petroleum prices are very, very low.
Paul, the same question for you. How do you and Novamont see these dynamics?
I mean, sure. I mean, I think, you know, like most people got to maybe realize bioplastics are still a very sort of, I would say, niche application. They're still, compared to standard plastics, I believe it's like less than 1% production is bioplastics compared to conventional plastic. So we really don't see any sort of slight fluctuation in oil prices. I would say it doesn't really affect us because, you know, we generally are competing with a higher cost product. It's not like a few percent. You know, even though it's a low cost item, you know, you might be talking quite a, 2-3 times the cost of a conventional plastic product. So again, we're really trying to build into the system the overall costs. So it's, again, it's not easy. We have to try and explain what are the total economic costs of maybe switching from a 2-cent product to say a 5-cent product. You know, what is the economic impact on the circular system? So again, we talk about the circular economy, and that's really a key point of our products. You have to really look at the application, just not a standalone product.
Okay, thanks.
If I can add one more comment, Nate and I are basically saying the opposite. He's saying that people won't pay a premium. I'm saying they will, and I think it's in some respects it's where the purchasing decision is being made. If a company has made a commitment to meet a 100% sustainable goal by 2025, it's that decision is driven from the very top. Usually the CEO makes that decision, and it flows downward. And those customers that have that commitment are typically more willing to accommodate, usually for short term, a higher price. If that company is simply trying to achieve a smaller benefit, then that penny per article starts to be the deciding factor. And so that's, again, it's how the customer values that environmental benefit determines how much they're willing to pay for that environmental benefit.
Yeah.
If they really are committed to a more sustainable product line or use of packaging, they will find a way to adjust their procurement behavior to account for what are today the higher costs of biopolymers.
That's correct. I completely agree with that. And we have to continuously remind the procurement people that it's kind of like getting a job. You have to get past the application process first, and it's the same thing here. You have to get past the procurement person, and so yes, we will use the corporate commitments to remind them that, hey, you do have this commitment. But every day, I mean, everyone's based on the P&L or profit and loss. I'm sorry, profit and loss, and it's a quarterly type of metric. So eventually, yeah, they may pay a little extra initially, like you said, but then the discussions come down to, okay, how can we get this to cost parity?
Right. It's always a desired goal.
Yep.
And it's really just where are you in that development cycle? We're finding that customers early on are more willing to absorb some of that cost as long as they see a path to something that's more affordable at a not too distant point in the future.
Agreed.
And I've heard from all three of you mostly already part of this answer. To make this happen, to make your company successful, get your bioplastics in various applications, including packaging, and for Nate, to get your packaging where it needs to be in the circular economy with your customers. What about, can you comment more, if you already didn't, on partnering? How has in the past decade for your company, in the past few years, how has partnering with customers, but also other parties, influenced basically your business success? Paul, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, in the US, I believe it's about 6% of food scraps are actually, composted. The rest goes to landfill. But in Milan, in Italy, 85% of residential food scraps are actually composted in a sense of anaerobic digestion. They are recycled. And again, so what we do, only last year, we were involved in helping to bring 5 cities from the US, municipalities, to see Milan, how the system works. It's going to take investment, it's going to take cost, but just to show you, there are systems in place that already do this. It can work. And regarding partnering, not only with sort of municipalities, we do partner with academia as well. So we do partner very closely with universities, particularly in Italy. One recent one, I think, is the University of Bologna and the Turin Polytechnic, and it's called the Resoil Foundation. And it's really trying to raise awareness of the importance of soil health. So again, we partner with municipalities, NGOs, but also academia as well. We do see, as important.
Mm-hmm. And Michael, for you, the same question: who are your key partners, or have been for your success?
Well, we obviously partner with major global brand owners, and I would say that without those partnerships, we would not be successful at all. We're a small company. There are certain things we do very well, but the introduction of a new package in the market is a very complex undertaking. Through the entire supply chain, from the grocery distributor to the store, to the converters, to the people that are filling the packages and printing and forming and sealing and all that. We can't do all that alone, and so we rely very strongly on those partnerships to both reduce risk and reduce the length of the development cycle. We could probably figure all those things out, but I would be long retired by the time we got one product out on the market.
Yeah.
By partnering, we can dramatically reduce those cycle times and the overall costs. If we are trying to get to a more circular economy, the best way to do that is to get more products out in the marketplace faster.
Yeah, and this also fortifies your comment that it's not only a price game, and you're not per se competing with oil-based materials. It is a broader perspective that your customers, your partners have to be successful at their end. Yeah. And Nate,
right.
You, of course.
Yeah, so for TC, 2 key partners, How to Recycle, as you mentioned that before. How to Recycle will give us the certification or the approval to be able to put that How to Recycle logo onto the package and be able to inform consumer or end users on what to do with the package after it's done. Yeah. And that's very key for our recycle ready packaging. Same thing with BPI, which is a certification organization that certifies our compostable packaging. Again, they allow us to put that logo on the package that says to the consumer, yes, this can be industrial compostable or home compostable. I believe those are two key organizations to our journey towards meeting that Ellen MacArthur Foundation pledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Yeah, so if I sum it up, on the partnering for the three of you, the audience can see that that is quite a broad and complex industry with many stakeholders that are all involved. We see cities, we see customers, OEMs, converters, also certifying bodies and NGOs and nonprofit organizations for customer education, end user education. So yeah, very good and interesting to hear. Then maybe let's see a few more questions from the Q&A in the last 5 minutes that we have. A simple question maybe, but not always easy to answer is, can compostable materials be recycled? Paul, is that something you can answer? So except, so not composted per se, but recycled as well.
Sure. At the moment, I would say our materials we really promote to be composted, to go with organics, because obviously, there's sometimes you get pushback that's saying they'll contaminate maybe standard recycling systems. We've done some work at very low levels. They shouldn't really affect recycling if it's in the low percentages. But again, our sort of driver really is to promote not just, not necessarily recycling the product, but actually, using the product to sort of, you could even argue the higher value is bring back organics to composting. That's our main focus. I do know some work is being done at looking at maybe even reusing, I think, food scraps and looking at maybe can we sort of is there some way of recycling our materials? But at the moment, I would say it's not too dry.
No, of course, a product is designed with end of mind. It's for the audience. Once you get your hands on the full slide deck, you can at your leisure look at the circular economy slide as designed for recycling in mind, or designed for end of life, excuse me. Sometimes it's recycling, sometimes it's composting, sometimes you want to make sure that if it might end up in nature inadvertently, that you design for that. Michael, what is your take on that compostable versus recyclable or n-recyclable?
Well, I think that technically there's no reason why a lot of compostable or degradable materials can't be recycled. As Paul said, often the lowest energy, best, highest value use is sending into a compost environment. But recognize also that these are all very immature materials. Novamont is one of the old hands in the business, having been around for almost 30 years. But polyethylene and other synthetic polymers have been around for 75 years. So we're all still very young, and we're still working through understanding what needs to be done technically and from a supply chain, how to make this recycling work for these materials. Because there may be cases where recycling is the best end of life option.
Yeah.
Again, with our design intent being composting, we haven't come across many of those, but it will come up as time goes by.
Some PHA is a polyester, so in principle, as you said, can perfectly be re-extruded in some way. Okay, and you mentioned indeed, according to the Ellen MacArthur pledge, compostable, recyclable. How do you see that balance of the end of life of various types of packaging?
Yes, so to answer the question directly, that can a compostable material be recycled? Technically, as I agree with Michael, the answer is yes. You should be able to mechanically or chemically recycle it. But just like any other industry out there, recyclers have to make money. And the only way they can make money is through volume. And so when I worked for PepsiCo Packaging, we used to have a phrase, go home, go big or go home. And that applies to the recycling world. So in newer plastics or newer materials where the volume's not there yet, it's very hard to make any for a recycler to make money off of that. So at the end of the day, you have to have volume similar to what you see with milk jugs, volumes that you see with soda bottles. Those are the type of volumes you need to have to be to make it economically feasible for recycling to work from a financial point of view.
Great. Okay, thanks. Okay, we are in the last minute. We want to be wary of everybody's time. So let me start rounding off. Maybe with a final statement from all three of you. We are aware that there is quite a number of young professionals or students in the audience. So what would you have from your industry point of view, also in view of the circular economy of plastics? What career advice would you have for any students and young professionals in the audience? Michael.
I think that the focusing on the fundamentals is what we're going to need. We're a growing industry, very early in its life, and we're going to have to do things very, very well to be successful. So focusing on those, being strong in whatever discipline you're focusing on. Because we're going to need to compete with companies that are much, much bigger, that have much, much more experience in the markets. And so we're going to have to do everything extremely well to be successful.
Thanks. Paul?
Yeah, I think my advice, since I started the industry, many years ago, even 20 odd years ago, sustainability I thought was more of a buzzword. But I do feel now it is really gaining traction. I do think there's a lot of stronger interest. There's a lot of NGOs. There's a lot of even governmental pressures, particularly linked to climate change. But I would say the circular economy, even though it's maybe like a buzzword, I would say it really has. If it's something you're really passionate about and you really believe in it, I feel we have to do something. We can't carry on as we are. Then I think, if you're passionate, there's lots of opportunities out there. I really believe it is the future. And again, I think, go seek it out, whether it's materials, renewable energy, waste management, whatever. We need passionate people. So again, welcome people on board, to try and really promote, what we're trying to do with this circular economy.
Great. Nate, any words of wisdom on your part?
Yeah, so I completely agree with Paul with regards, having worked in the industry for 27 years, you got to be able to wake up in the morning and want to go and be passionate about what you do. So choose a career that you're passionate about. If it happens to be in the field of sustainability, my other advice would be really get to know the materials, get to know the processes, get to know all of the stakeholders that contribute to the issue, because there's so many little details that really flow into. It's not as simple or knee-jerk as let's just get rid of plastics. It's really around knowing what is feasible from a technical point of view, what's feasible from a financial point of view, and what's feasible, what type of legislation it could be adopted. So there's a lot of factors, and I would just say really understand the issues well.
Yeah, great. All right, thank you. Great, gentlemen, thank you all three enormously for your time. It was a very interesting webinar. The last slide here that I have for the audience is contact information. Also, please stay tuned at the UNC Institute for the Environment Cleantech website, where there is some more webinars coming. And for me, it's Jaap's at Pace. Thank you so much for attending. And the materials will be available at your leisure. And have a great day. Bye-bye.